In this tutorial, we will learn how to implement parameterized tests or data-driven tests in which the data input is injected in the test in order to use the same test logic. Parameterized tests are a good way to define and run multiple test cases where the only difference between them is the data. There are different ways to provide data inputs, the parameters for tests from different sources. Here are these argument providers implemented as annotation in JUnit 5. First, we have the @ValueSource annotation used to specify an array of primitive values of string, int, long, or double. Next, we have @EnumSource annotation. This is an argument source for constants of a specified enum. Next, we have the @MethodSource annotation, which provide access to values returned by static methods of the class in which this annotation is declared. We will see an example for this annotation. Next, we have the @CSVSource annotation. This is an argument source which reads comma-separated values from its attribute. We have also the CSV file source annotation, which is used to load the CSV file from one or more class path resources. Finally, we have the @argument source annotation used to specify a custom argument provider. We will see also an example for this argument source. We will start with the value source parameterized test. This annotation is used with parameterized test annotation to specify a parameterized test in which the argument source or the provider is an array of primitive value of string, int, long, or double. These values are specified inside the annotation using the element string, ints, longs, or doubles. Let's switch to IntelliJ. I created a class called ValueSourceParamTest under the package code.codewithtwins.params.test. Here you can see the test method testWithStrings. This defines a parameterized test in which an array of string is specified. We have 3 arguments in the annotation value source, code, and then with and finally twins. Therefore, the test logic will be executed 3 times, once per value. This data is injected in the test method using the arguments of the method, in this case through the string variable named arguments. When this test class is executed, we have then the output as follows: so code with twins, 3 arguments. I added other test methods for int, long, and double. You can download the code from our GitHub repo. Check the GitHub link in the description. Let's move on to the EnumSource annotation. The annotation EnumSource allows to specify a parameterized test in which the input data is a Java enumeration class. By default, each value of the enum will be used to feed the test once at a time. The EnumSource annotation allows to filter the member of the enum in several ways. The following elements can be specified within an EnumSource annotation with the mode and names elements, as you can see in the example. The mode element is a constant value which determines the type of filtering. The possible values are include. This is the default option used to select those values whose names are given via the names element. Exclude, used to select all values except those supplied with the names element. Match_all is used to select those values whose names match the pattern in names element. Match_any used to select those values whose names match any pattern in the names element. The names element is the array of a string which allow to select a group of enum constants. Let's switch to IntelliJ to see an example for this annotation. I created the class EnumSourceParamTest, which has the test method test with enum. This method is annotated with @parameterized test and @EnumSource. As you can see, the value of this annotation is the defined enum book genre. If we run the test method test with enum, it will be executed 5 times. That is 1 per book genre enumeration value. In the test method test with filtered enum, the enum constant set is filtered using the element names. As you can see, only the constant action and programming will be used to feed this test, because the default mode, as I said before, is include. When running this test, the output only contains action and programming enumeration values. Next, we have the test method test with exclude enum. This is the same as before with a difference. Here the mode is exclude, and the execution of the test, we can see the test is executed only 3 times because we now exclude the self-help and classics enumeration values, so we then have the remaining enumeration values: action, adventure, and programming. Finally, we have the test method test with regex enum. This method defines an inclusion mode match_all using a regular expression to filter the enumeration. The regular expression used in this example is simple. This means that only the values will be included that starts and ends with classics. After the execution of this method, only 1 book genre is printed, and that's correct. That's it. Next, we will see how we generate test data or arguments using the method source annotation. With the method source annotation, you can define the name of the static method, which delivers you the arguments for the test as a Java stream. Let's see an example. In the method source param test class, we have the parameterized test in which the argument provider is a static method called string provider. This method returns a stream of strings. If we run the method test with string provider, you can see how the test is executed twice. The type of object contained in the stream is not required to be just string. This type can be anything. Here is an example for method source which is linked to a static method called bookProvider, which returns a stream of book object. This type is named book, and it is implemented as an inner class with 2 properties, title and price. When running this test method, the parameterized test is executing twice, once per book objects contained in the stream. Finally, it is worth to know that the method providers are allowed to return a stream of different types. This is very convenient for real-world test cases. Here in this example, test with multiple arg method source, we have the parameterized test in which the argument provider is a method that returns arguments of mixed type, string and int. These parameters are injected in the test as method arguments called title and price. If we run this test method, we will get the output design pattern in Java $20 and mastering JUnit 5 $20. And that's correct. Next, we will check the CSV source annotation. Another way to define the source of arguments for parameterized tests is using comma-separated values. This can be done using the annotation CSV source, which allows to embed CSV content as string in the value of the annotation. If the CSV data are big, it might be more convenient using CSV file source annotation instead. This annotation allows to feed the parameterized test with a CSV file located in the class path of the project. So let's switch to IntelliJ to see some example for CSV source and CSV file source annotations. I created the test class CSV param test, which has 2 test methods. The first test method test with CSV source use the annotation CSV source. This annotation contains an array of strings. We can see in each element of the array there is a different value separated by commas. The content of the CSV is automatically converted to string and double. When running the test, we have 3 single tests, each per entry in the array. Each execution will be invoked passing 2 arguments to the test. The first one is named title and has the type string, and the second one is called price and its type is double. The second test method, test with CSV file source, will use the CSV file books.csv under test resources. The annotation CSV file source locates the file using the method getResourceStream. Since our resource is located in the root of the class path, we need to locate it as /books.csv. Since the CSV file has 3 rows of data, there are 3 test executions, each one with the 2 parameters. The first one is title as string and the second one is the price as double. That's all for CSV source and CSV file source. Let's check now the arguments source annotation. The last annotation to specify the source of argument is arguments source. With this annotation, we can specify a custom class that we can reuse in different tests, which will contain the parameters for the test. This class must implement the interface arguments provider. Let's see an example of it. In the following test class arguments source param test, we implement a Jupyter parameterized test in which the argument source will be specified in the class custom arguments provider. The class custom arguments provider implements the interface arguments provider. That's why we must override the method provide arguments in which the actual definition of the parameters for the test is implemented. We can see that the method returns a stream of arguments. We are returning a couple of entries in the stream, each one with 2 arguments, string and double respectively. When running the test method, test with argument source, we get 2 test executions, each one with 2 parameters, title and price. So in this tutorial, we have learned how to create parameterized tests in JUnit 5 using different argument providers. You can download or clone the code for this tutorial in our Git repo, so check the link in the description. Thanks for watching and see you in another tutorial. Bye.